What's good Tesla family? It's Ray J back with another video, and in this one I'm going to be talking about the one and only Tesla stock and what you should be looking out for the future. I'm also going to break down why tomorrow is going to be a very interesting day for Tesla because we do have some bullish catalysts that just came out that actually help Tesla outperform the market, but at the same time we have to be very cautious because in the market we are getting some signals suggesting that we might get a slowdown very soon, maybe a slight pullback. So I'm going to break down how this all could affect Tesla, what's going on with CPI as it was a little bit higher than expected, just a tiny bit, and how that could also affect the Fed and the markets, what Elon Musk put on his Twitter page, what the data is telling us, and how all of these things may affect Tesla's share price for tomorrow and the near term future. Now, before I break anything down though, before I get into any more details, I do have to mention a couple of things real quick. Firstly, I'm not a financial planner. Make sure you take none of this as financial advice whatsoever. And also, if you guys can, please smash the like button if you want to see more videos like this. It not only benefits me, it benefits the entire Tesla community as a whole. And the last things, if you guys can, please check out the Moomoo link down below and in the description. If you sign up for Moomoo, the link down below, and deposit $100 into the account, you're guaranteed 5 free stocks plus free level 2 data with $0 in trading commissions. It's a limited time offer. The offer ends today, so make sure you check it out before they run out. With that out of the way, let's get on with the video. Tesla was up over 7% for the day, and that's because we had an external bullish catalyst as we are seeing a hedge fund titan known as George Soros buying into Tesla, buying more and more of these shares, which is incentivizing more buyers to come in, and it's really building the credibility into this stock. Now, I do think it's very awesome to see this, and I did actually call out many possibilities yesterday. I wasn't really sure exactly what would happen, but I did mention that if you're a bear, you have to watch the support zones and some of the gaps on Tesla. If you're a bull, you have to remember the fact that we could have formed that this inverse head and shoulders like formation. The drop we saw on Tesla yesterday could have been the head, and we had like a potential left shoulder and maybe a right shoulder developing. So I did call out this as a possible setup. And once you saw the big pump today, followed by the nice continuation, it would have been very clear to you guys that this would have been what was playing out. And this is going to likely continue and complete. And that's why we're going to hit a very important level at 215. Now, before I get into more details about the technicals, we have to talk about the context of Tesla and the markets right now because we had a very, very tricky day for the markets, okay? CPI came out and it ended up being a little bit high, just a tiny bit higher than expected. The market gapped down in a fake gap down move. Then all of a sudden, we got this big rally to fill the gap. We got a fake out rally. SPY got to 415. Then we got a big rejection, came all the way down to 408, tricking lots of bulls during this move, and then lots of bears got tricked down here. Then the market started to just rally as the day went on, and that's despite the fact that after CPI came out, the Fed speakers came and they were quite hawkish. It was not enough to stop this market. We closed just barely red, down 0.05% on SPY. The QQQ was a little bit green thanks to the fact that many tech stocks did push up, such as Tesla. So we had a very, very interesting day today. I'm going to break down some information first. I just want to note to you guys that there are big bears out there that might try to drag the markets down, but you have to remember that we do have excessive puts in this market, at least as of right now for Friday. So on Friday, let me see if I can highlight this. Anyways, for Friday, we actually have about 3 million puts out of the money. So some of the bears might try to push the market down, but the market makers are going to try to work against it and hold the markets up. It works in the market makers' favor to hold the market up. There's lots of manipulation right now. And at the same time, others are going to try the opposite. So I do expect lots of sideways action. We might come down a bit this week, maybe not too significantly because of the options chain, but going into next week, things could start to change. I also want to note that typically, going back to 2022, if we got a somewhat hot CPI plus a very hawkish Fed, the market would typically crash or take a big hit. This time it did not happen as the buyers are still existent. They're still fighting. The bulls have not given up. They have not capitulated. So it's a very, very interesting market. Now, when it comes to CPI, we actually got about 6.4% year over year, a little bit higher than both the consensus and the forecast. And then for core CPI year over year, it was 5.6%, a little bit higher than both of those as well, higher than expectations. So CPI was a little bit hot. Month over month, it did meet most expectations. A little bit higher on the core side, though, but overall, it was close to expectations, but a little bit hotter overall. And on top of that, I want to note that there has been a new way in which it has been calculated. So it has been inflated to some degrees through different sectors, especially on the energy sector side of it. Looking at some charts right here, we can actually see that there was an increase in CPI during the first half of the year. Basically it was just getting worse and worse and worse, right? This is the rate at which it changed. And then this is for 2022, by the way. Then 2022 comes into like the third or fourth quarter. Right here it continued to increase, then it started decreasing during the last quarter. So right here it's been on a downtrend again and again. It slowed down, it slowed down, then all of a sudden we got another tick to the upside. So now this is telling me that there is a possibility and a risk that inflation is going to increase again, especially as we get closer to summer. Now, this is the opposite of what Jerome Powell initially told us. And so far, the market is not necessarily crashing off of this. A lot of that is because of manipulation and also because of the fact that sentiment is very different right now. Uh, right before the CPI report, there was a lot of greed in this market. Lots of people are still buying in. So it is what it is, right? It's very ironic, very different from 2022. But I do believe that the next CPI report will also be very telling. So will the FOMC meeting. But right now, I do believe the Fed is going to take a more hawkish stance. We actually saw a lot of the Fed officials being more hawkish than before. So it could slow the market down a bit later on. So please be prepared for that. And on top of that, I want to note that looking at the data specifically, I actually have the details right here. You can see all items were up 0.5% for the entire month of January relative to December. And then food was actually up a little bit. Energy was up a lot more. Energy made a big part of it. So did utilities. And then we also saw things such as, I believe, like Medicare commodities up a little bit more than before, more significantly. And other things were not as bad, like Medicare services. But overall, guys, once again, it is a little bit hot, and there is a risk that inflation is going to continue to increase. Now, with that out of the way, it didn't really affect the market too horribly. I want to now transition to the news that came out for Tesla. Elon Musk did retweet this. Basically, the first Model Y and Model 3 deliveries came out in Thailand. Once again, incredible news for Tesla as Tesla is expanding all over the world. People all over the world are learning about the brand. They love the company. I consider this awesome, awesome news, and I do believe more expansion is yet to come. There was also news about Tesla's Master Plan 3 and the road to the $10 trillion market cap, as this will likely be published very, very soon on March 1st, in about 2 weeks away, a little bit more than that. And that's also very awesome news because it's going to lead to more positive sentiment for investors, as Tesla does mention possible roadblocks and their plan to continue to increase and reach the trillions in their market cap as years go on. So very, very awesome, awesome news in my opinion. And on top of that, we had more news that came out. We did have some somewhat negative news, at least for Tesla as a company. I'm not saying this objectively. I'm saying this because in New York, employees at the company's Gigafactory 2 in Buffalo are attempting to unionize, according to Reuters. If they're successful, this would be the first Tesla plant in the US to unionize, and it could actually raise labor costs a bit. So I'm not going to pick a side about whether or not this is right. My main point is, as a business for Tesla, if they have a lot more labor costs, if it's going to continue to increase, this could make it a lot more difficult for them, and it could incentivize them to actually lay off more employees. Not confirmed, but I just wanted to note this, right? This was all over the headlines. At the same time, in China, Investors Business Daily did report the fact that insurance registrations of Tesla cars in China dropped about 20% last week. That's a small sign of weakening demand. It's just 1 week. That's why I don't consider this too massive. But we are seeing some slowdowns in China. Very important to note. But we do have some very good news. That's because George Soros, the hedge fund titan, has tripled his stake in Tesla last quarter, buying nearly 250,000 shares, growing his stake at over like 332,000. So lots of buyers are coming in. We're seeing more and more people coming in when this was reported. And I do believe that's great news for Tesla because we're getting more big investors involved in the company, looking at their earnings, their numbers, their financials. Very impressive stuff for Tesla. Look at the Model Y inventory levels. It still is relatively low, meaning that we're still seeing high demand in the US. We're still seeing the buyers just buying up these EVs, and it still is very popular. Tesla had 200 plus million in volume. The volume is very nice. Lots of buyers are continuing to come in and buy into Tesla, and this is awesome news as it's well above the average. And on top of that, I do expect the short volume percentage to continue to drop, showing that those with long positions, the buyers are likely going to be gaining the edge over the stock. And on top of that, even though Tesla slowed down a bit yesterday, it is outperforming the market again, both the QQQ and SPY. So the price price ratio is likely going to increase a little bit more. And many analysts remain very, very bullish on Tesla. Now let's talk about the technicals. What is actually going on? Well, to start off with Apple, Apple's actually just chopping back and forth. It's actually down 0.4%, but I do believe Apple is set for actually some very boring price action in a way. I do see this thing getting very close to key resistance, and it might get a rejection and actually retrace just a little bit and trade pretty much sideways around this level. A 154 rejection could take it down to 152, but I don't really expect it to be way too volatile for the time being. Microsoft is a bit overextended, and I want to note that there is this gap down here. There's a good chance that it's going to likely come down, retest the 5 minute 200 EMA. And if it breaks below that, if it breaks below 269, you have to watch 267. Over the next couple of days, I see this getting retested. And if it breaks below 267, I do believe that's very likely to happen. We could come all the way down to fill this gap either this week or early next week. It's looking like that to me because I do believe it's a little overextended off the news that came out. That could also slow down, the tech sector, at least to some degree. QQQ was somewhat green. It did get a nice push up with the market and also Tesla. And I also want to note that for the QQQ, we're getting very close to major resistance around this 308 to 310 area. If we do end up retesting it, we could get a bit of a rejection, then come all the way back down to 305 and have a very flat close, maybe somewhat red over the next couple of days, but not really too red, right? I do think it could pull back a bit. I don't think it's going to be that significant as of right now. And we are still seeing buyers come in. So this could also be a trap as we do have a rising wedge like formation. Uh, we just have to wait and see how it goes. I think it's going to be dictated by Tesla and many other tech sectors. Looking at the VIX, this thing actually broke down into its falling wedge again. So this is not the best of signs for the Bears because it didn't actually bounce off of this. And that's something that worried me over the last couple of days. We're actually back in the falling wedge. So I do think the VIX might try to get a rebound just a little bit. I do think the market's going to just remain pretty much sideways. And the VIX needs to get back above 20 for the Bears to get the edge because right now, the VIX is down pretty hard and the market is actually liking this. The bulls are liking this. They're gaining somewhat of an edge over the bears. Now, looking at the dollar index, this thing is pretty flat as of right now, not really doing too much. If it remains this way, the market could continue to chop. But if it does continue to get the rally, which I do believe could come as we approach March, the market could pull back. As of right now, the momentum is weakening on the dollar index, but we still have the breakout. So it's not necessarily a dead cat in the water. We just have to give it more time. The last thing I want to talk about is the 10-year treasury yield, if I could actually find it on my charts. That this is going to be very important because it tells us what smart money or institutions, if you want to call them that, are actually starting to price in. The yield is continuing to go up because the market is getting ready for the Fed to be a little bit more on the hawkish side. They are prepared for even higher rates of inflation, right? Now, this is telling me that typically the market would actually slow down a bit more than how much it did so far. If this thing breaks this 38 level, we can actually see the 10 year get to about 38.6. Once again, a bearish sign for the markets. So we have very mixed signals. And what's my bottom line in all of this? I believe we're not going to come crashing down. I really don't think it's going to happen that quickly. That's just my 2 cents. I think the market's going to likely remain pretty much sideways for quite a bit of time because of the market makers. And we might see a bit of a pullback maybe by the end of this week or going into next week. I'm not saying a crash, I'm saying a bit of a pullback where the market does slow down. If you are trading SPY, make sure you watch 410 and then 408. If it breaks below 408, it has a lot of room to come down to about 405. It could come down to those levels maybe by the end of this week or maybe going into next week, right? But once again, remember, there are lots of puts for Friday on SPY. So the market makers might try to keep the market afloat. Now, anyways, let's talk about Tesla. What's going on with Tesla? For Tesla, we have a very strong trend. If you look at the hourly time frame, the MACD is still open. And a lot of this had to do with hype and lots of people becoming very excited about major hedge funds buying into Tesla. We do have a potential. And as I mentioned before, this inverse head and shoulders that has been playing out. And it does give Tesla more room to try to get back to this 214 to 215 area. Now, I just want to note once again, if more good news comes, here are the levels you have to watch for. I believe Tesla's going to try to get to 215 or 214 to 215, like that area. I do believe Tesla will try to get to it. I want to note that on the daily charts, I know it's a little hard to see, but the 200 EMA happens to be right about at 215. I do believe Tesla could try to get close to it again. And then if we break 215, the first thing we have to do is break 220 because we do have some resistance there. Then we have the 200 moving average at 225. So that's why 215 is very important. If this thing breaks it, 225 could come, but I'm not making that my prediction, right? I'm just saying this hypothetically so you're prepared for a very bullish possibility. Now, if you're a bear, okay, for the bears, what you have to watch for is 205 on Tesla. If Tesla breaks below 205, it has a lot of room to actually come down to about this 200 area. If it breaks below that, then you have to watch 193, 189, followed by about 185 a share. Now, do I think that's going to happen immediately? I think that when stocks have big moves like this, there tends to be a lot of momentum that's going to likely try to continue. Now, remember, I can't predict the future perfectly on a daily basis as it depends on the news as well. But my 2 cents are telling me, okay, I would predict that Tesla would likely continue to climb. Maybe lots of these shorts did get squeezed. There could be more buying pressure if this thing could break 209, and this thing might try to get all the way up to this 214 area, maybe almost 214 to 215. It might try to get all the way up here. But I do believe that the market is going to likely slow down a bit. That's just my prediction. And I'm saying that because of the fact that there are still lots of bears lingering around. I don't think the market's just going to explode instantly. I think the market's going to slow down a bit. And I also think that uh, seeing how Tesla was showing some signs of exhaustion right here, there's a chance it might get slowed down or even stopped all the way up to this 214 to 215 area. So there is a chance of a rejection right there and Tesla to trade sideways and come all the way back down to maybe 209. Maybe it pulls back a little lower, but once again, I do see it closing kind of flat. And I do think Tesla might get a rejection off 215. We do have some strong resistance there around the 200 EMA. Now, in case we break it, don't forget about the areas above. I just wanted to note these. Tesla did rally off a piece of news that came out today, and the hype could die down relatively quickly. And this whole setup, this inverse head and shoulders, is telling us that Tesla's target is about 214 or so. So just be prepared for that. And don't forget that profit is profit. Do not be too greedy and do what's best for your own portfolios and your own lives. So, anyways, thank you all for listening. I hope this video was not too long. My target is this zone all the way up here. I'm going to be very careful whether Tesla could break it or not. I'm not really counting on it to break it, but if it does, it is what it is. I just want to note that please be very cautious during a time like this because, the market is just still holding up despite a high CPI report and despite the Fed being hawkish. Even if Tesla tries to push up a little bit, the Fed, when they come out, they might not like this, and they could even have an effect in the future because there's lots of trickery in the markets. So, anyways, I hope that's clear. I'm looking for Tesla to get a nice continuation, but I'm not going to be like a mega, mega bull and just like, buy way too hard up here. This is not the best of buying areas, in my opinion. Non financial advice, by the way. I'm going to be very patient. Look at this as a profit taking area for calls if you guys are in them. And I'm going to be very, very careful. Watch this thing carefully and just be careful. Anyways, thank you all for listening. I do apologize if I made this video too long. I want the best for everyone and be ready for some more manipulation tomorrow. Thank you. Tesla to the moon because the long term future is still incredibly bright. And peace out.